Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, the mic is a little bit, okay, it's fine actually, you guys are talking really loud, okay. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsani ila yawm ad-din. Allahumma ja'alna minhum ameen. We begin obviously by, we actually began with pizza, but now we begin by praising Allah, okay? And thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, thanking God Almighty for the blessings that He's given us, air conditioning, nice weather, everyone say alhamdulillah. Finally, we're outside of, the 100+ numbers, alhamdulillah. To the point where I was driving today and it was too cold in my car, subhanAllah. So interesting, because I just came back from Saudi Arabia where it was 125, people were cooking eggs on the street, and I got back and it's too cold. It's just so interesting how fickle human beings can be, right? At one stage of my life I can be complaining, the next I'll be complaining, but about the opposite. I'll get what I want, I'll still be complaining. So we thank Allah constantly for all the blessings that we have, alhamdulillah. Think about it this way, if you said alhamdulillah every moment that you remembered, it still wouldn't be enough. It still wouldn't be enough, right? So we always thank Allah, and then we ask Allah to send His peace and blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who gave us example, guided us, and gives us a role model, acts as a role model for us to look towards. So obviously tonight's talk, as per the attendance, is about relationships. Something tells me that if we did it on something else, it wouldn't be this crowded, but that's okay. It shows a good yearning to learn, and actually I think what this speaks to is that this is a topic that is particularly, you have a lot of intersection and engagement with this in your everyday life. And so I know the topic said, first of all, I did not come up with the title. Okay. I did not come up with the title. I probably would have chose something a little less Drake, right? And then putting Drake on my shoulder was a nice touch. I don't know who did that, but that was pretty cute, mashallah. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's okay, don't worry about it, right? Let's move on quickly, inshallah. But I think what this speaks to, and I know the marriage subtitle was, the lecture subtitle was Marriage in Islam, but I think marriage is one of the articulations of what we're going to talk about tonight, which is relationships. And the reason why I don't want to get too quick into the whole marriage discussion is because a lot of times, I'm a marriage counselor. I'm an imam. I do counseling for couples all the time, and I think one of the issues that I'm seeing is that people spend way too much on focusing on who to marry and what the wedding is going to look like and all these things, and they don't focus enough on setting themselves up or that relationship up to be successful. And so it's really sad, I just came back from Hajj, alhamdulillah, and one of the interesting things, it was fine, thank you for asking, and one of the things about Hajj, that's really, really remarkable is that that's different from Umrah, right? For those who don't know, Hajj is when you go to Mecca and Medina and you do the whole, Prophet Ibrahim and Hajj alayhi salam, you do the whole ritual. Umrah is the same thing, but a minor version of that, right? And Hajj is very interesting because a lot of couples come together. A lot of couples, I would say in our group, we had 50 people. I would say 45 or 46, it has to be an even number, right? Okay, 46 were couples. And then you have a couple people that just came solo, and some were siblings, and they made it clear every time, we are not a couple, we are related, right? Although sometimes in our community that doesn't matter. So anyways, not siblings. Not siblings. Let's move on, quickly. Still have jet lag, okay? Move on. Everyone's what? Okay. So in that environment, we had daily reminders and daily sessions about spirituality and taking advantage of Hajj, and you can imagine Hajj is this the penultimate moment of your life. A lot of us we think of Hajj as almost like a fairy tale. Yeah, I'll do it one day or I'll get there eventually. I know I was thinking of it like that before I went. And you get there and we're talking about different aspects of spirituality and relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how to really capitalize on the moment, because everyone wants a Malcolm, rahimahullah, everyone wants that Hajj experience, right? They want that transformation. And so the interesting thing was, after a couple days of giving lectures on spirituality and Hajj and how to make the most of it, all the couples were like, can we just have like marriage sessions? And I started doing marriage counseling at Hajj. Like we're sitting like in the Raffles Hotel. I'm not a baller, I just got a room, right? So like, in the Raffles, and like we're overlooking like the Kaaba, and I'm talking to like, you know, a young couple that's struggling with like anger. Or like I'm talking to a young man that maybe like, you know, subhanAllah, like not to shock anybody, but a young man who like cheated on his wife, and she was there with him, and they're expecting, and it's a whole slew of issues, and she just found out like 3 weeks prior to it, and it's just like really chaotic. But this was happening, and so marriage and relationships, let's say, are things that are so ubiquitous. It impacts everybody, you know, and it doesn't matter like what level of religiosity you claim to have, or like what background you're from, or what ethnicity or socioeconomic status, like everybody in every culture in some way, shape, or form addresses relationships. And I think that Allah Ta'ala addresses it for us, and a lot of times we've been raised not to even engage with the topic, right? Like how many of you were like taught like don't talk about that? Raise your hand. Okay, if your parents aren't here, raise your hand, right? So like, yeah, you were taught like, what were you taught about like relationships? Sorry, you can finish chewing, but like.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, right? So it's like, but how did I get here? They're like, don't ask, right? Science, right? Like, which is what you should be studying, you know, like. And so, like, you know, relationships don't exist. I remember one time, there was a commercial on TV, and I was at someone's house, and there was an uncle, auntie, and the little kids saw, there was like a silhouette, I think it was like a ring, like a diamond commercial, and there was a silhouette of like of a couple that was like, you know, holding hands and like moving in for the kiss, and it was like, every kiss begins with, very good, right? So then, at that moment, like the kids were like, oh look, and like the auntie was like, no, she turned the TV off, right? And I kind of was like, in that moment, I was like, what if it was like a married couple? Is that okay or no? Like, is it still haram? Is it still toba? Like, is that, you know, toba, for all of us who don't know, it's like what like the Indo-Pak community says when like someone makes a mistake, right? They start grabbing their earlobes for some reason. Okay? But to address that first, okay, because we're gonna have, you guys have all been sold, like Drake said, like you've been sold something, right? And like you're upset about it, okay? So you've been sold a couple lies, and whenever I do sessions with anybody, like inshallah, we'll have like regular sessions together every week, if we can make it happen, about different topics. But the one thing I tell like the students is, everyone smile for the camera that's about to get okay. So the one thing I tell people is like, prepare yourself to like unlearn some stuff. Because you've been taught some stuff, and your parents or your Sunday school teachers or your community or whoever, like they tried their best, and we should thank them for it, because it's not easy, right? Has anyone ever taught something and like made a mistake? Yeah, if you're a tutor, then you should just leave, right? So like you taught something, you made a mistake, like that's normal, right? Like I've taught things and made mistakes in my teaching and wanted to go back, not necessarily even in the content, but maybe in like if the person was ready to hear it or whatnot. So our parents and our Sunday schools and whatever, our religious or spiritual or ethical education, it tried, but sometimes it failed, right? And we're noticing that even with the race conversation in America today, that like sometimes it tried and it failed, or like the misogyny conversation, the sexist conversation today, like it tried and it didn't do well. So we're trying to reconstruct like our ideas about what it means to be a man or a woman or a male or female, what it means to be black or a person of color versus what it means to be white in this country. Like we're having all these conversations, and that's good. And along with that, I want to talk to you about like spirituality and like in regards to that marriage, because they do intersect. And I think a lot of people, the biggest issue that I see in marriages as a counselor who's done like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases now, is that when people fail to see how their relationship with the divine intersects with the relationship with their spouse, that's when they fail. You know, if someone can think, I can be good to other people and not be good to my family, that person's failed. Or I can be good as a Muslim and not be good as a husband or a wife, that person's already failed. So the biggest thing, right, and the reason why I think we're stumbling so much is because we didn't have a very open and honest conversation about it. So that's what we're here for today, inshallah, okay? So this idea that relationships are taboo, should not be talked about, it was actually never the case with the Prophet ﷺ. Which, I'm telling you, the more you study the life of this man, this individual, is so remarkable, so incredible, right? The more you study, the more you'll realize that things are taboo in your like culture that weren't taboo to him. People don't want to talk about stuff in Palestine or Egypt or Syria, may Allah help them. People don't want to talk about things there, or Pakistan, or India, or Bangladesh, or, people don't want to have those conversations, that the Prophet was like really open to having. Like, he was so chill. He was like, come on in, right? Walk-ins available, People would show up and ask him questions, and even his companions would be shocked. Like, how could you ask that, right? And he would be like, don't worry about it. It's totally cool. So there's a couple of stories I want to share with you, and I kind of, again, this is just for the reconstruction moment, because we're unlearning and now we're going to rebuild. So what is the understanding of a relationship in Islam? Like, what's the default ruling of a relationship? Like, a lot of people, like you said, like parents are like, it doesn't exist, don't worry about it. It's like, what's a boy? You're like, nothing, it's shaitan, right? Like, right? Parents are like, don't focus on that. Like, just focus on, becoming a physician, inshallah. And you'll be happy. Just marry medicine, you'll be happy. Okay? So, how did the Prophet ﷺ address these issues? Like, how did he talk about these issues? There was someone, and you might have heard this story before, but I want to reframe it so you can understand it in a different light. There was someone that came to the Prophet ﷺ, a young man, okay, probably about the age of some of you guys. Okay, and he shows up to the Prophet ﷺ, and there's like a gathering of companions around him, okay? And the companions are kind of like the audience, and so it's very interesting. The companions would never ask the Prophet ﷺ because they were too shy. So they would actually like celebrate when a Bedouin showed up, because I don't know if you guys know this, but Bedouins were like the OGs. Like, they would not care. They would go in, like, you heard the stories about the guy who peed in the masjid, like just in the corner, just like started peeing. Like, that was a Bedouin, okay? Like, you heard about the guy who, like, the Prophet gave him money, he said, not enough, why are you so cheap, to the Prophet, right? That was a Bedouin, okay? So, like, Bedouins kind of like, they're a little rough around the edges, okay? They're like from Waxahachie, okay? So, they're not really like refined, like us Dallas people, okay? So, or Plano, let's be honest, okay? So, this Bedouin, this young, like, Bedouin, like, kind of like rough around the edges companion, he comes, and he asks the Prophet ﷺ very boldly, just very open. I want you to imagine this. He just goes to the Prophet, he says, Ya Rasulullah, there's this girl that I really like, can I hook up with her? Like, go to Imam Mukhtar, Plano Masjid. Go to Shaykh Dean. Like, I want you guys to go to, like, Muhammad Khan and be like, hey, question. He's, like, done with his session. You're like, can I just, like, there's a girl here. Can you just hook up? Like, can I get a fatwa? Like, that's literally what he was asking for, okay? And so you can imagine, like, how did the companions react? Like, you tell me. Right? They were just like, what? Like, no, literally, some of them were so upset. A little more seriously, let's kind of like turn our gear a little bit. Like, they were really upset. Like, how could you come into this gathering and just do that? Like, why? What's in you that causes you to think that that's okay? That's not an okay question to ask. So some of them were like getting ready to like straight up tackle this dude. And the Prophet ﷺ just very calmly, very cool, like very chill, like he was. He just tells him like, hold, right, chill. And he looks at the young man and he just asks him one question, okay? He doesn't even say no. Like, the first thing that I would think of was like, no, let's talk about it, right? He's like, let me ask you something. And he's like, yeah. He goes, do you have any relatives in your family, like any, like your mother, obviously, do you have a sister, do you have an aunt, do you have like a niece, like any lady relatives in your family that like, you're very like, you love them and like you want to like, you don't want to see them like be, have this relationship with somebody? And he's like, yeah, of course. And he's like, what would you do? What would you say if some other man came to me and said, yo, this guy's sister, like, can I hook up with her? And he's like, I'd be really upset, right? As my sister and as someone who didn't want her to like, just hook up with some random dude, like, I'd be upset. And he's like, so how do you think this young lady's family, right, her mom, her dad, how do you think they feel? And the young man, subhanAllah, he just like, it clicked, right? But the interesting thing is that the Prophet ﷺ didn't say like, this doesn't exist, right? Like, you don't even talk about that stuff. He said like, look, in this context that you're asking for it, there is a boundary that you're bumping up against right now, okay? And this is how we handle it. That these things are okay in certain parameters, but right now, the way you're requesting it, there's no honor in that. I used to work at the Apple store. I don't know if you can tell by like my watch and my phone. But like, I used to work at the Apple store. I used to work with this lady named Carla, really sweet lady, right? And she was like super Italian, super nice, drink cannolis like every day. And hence the diet, why I can't eat pizza. So I remember one time, like I was getting married to my wife and I was working to save up to get married because that's how some people have to do it, okay? We don't get the elephants at our shadis, okay? We just, get like small tray of biryani and make it work, alhamdulillah. Right, but there's a lot of barakah, alhamdulillah, okay? So I was getting married to my wife, like I was saving up cash to like get married, and I was in college, okay? So I you know, mashallah, I did the dream, right? Everyone's like, how did you do it? How did you get married in college? One day, son, I'll tell you, inshallah. One day, okay? So I remember sitting and talking to her, and she's like, Carla was like, why can't you, like, why, because she was asking me why I wanted to get the job, and of course if I say I'm saving up to get married, like, who's not going to give me a job, right? So, like, I used that line in my Apple interview, and it was, like, instant tears, like, they were, like, in love. So, she was like, why are you getting married? Like, why don't you just, like, you know, aren't you kind of young? And I said, you know, Carla, the reason why, like, marriage is so important to people in my faith is because it's more than just, like, a verbal promise. It ends up becoming, like, a sacred bond. You know, and if someone gets in a relationship with somebody before marriage, like there's literally nothing besides that person's word that is like basically gonna hold that person accountable, right? In marriage, there are things, legally there's contracts, and even spiritually there's like a bond that a person has to be concerned about. But if a person doesn't have any concern for that stuff, then it's just as good as that person's word, right? And she was like, I wanna have a Muslim marriage. And no, listen why, because her two previous boyfriends, both, and I'm not trying to like generalize, they both cheated on her. And she told me, she's like, next time a guy wants to date me, I'm gonna bring him to my dad's house and he's gonna have to ask, right? And then I explained to her how like sometimes in some cultures, like the girl doesn't even get to kick it with the guy yet, she just walks in with tea and like serves it, and that's how the guy is like, you know, kind of like, okay, don't go, right? And she was like, I'm gonna come in with lemonade, and she was trying to like apply it to her context. But you know what's interesting? Is that she found the honor of marriage within the Islamic paradigm. She found the honor really attractive as a human. She found it really awesome. And sometimes, like as Muslims, one of our issues, if you're not Muslim, I apologize for generalizing, but like as people who are born or raised or converted to Islam, sometimes we struggle with the idea or the notion that like we have to have a little bit of self-discipline. And we almost look at like people who aren't Muslim as like, what's it like being out of prison, right? Like we're like, that's it. I personally think that's why we love hearing converse stories, because we're like, tell us what it was like on the outside. You know, like, where you could do whatever you wanted and it didn't matter. Like, you know, and I think we sort of like, almost like fetishize over that. Like we're like, what's it like not having rules? And I think, you know, subhanAllah, what I realized was that it's not about rules or not rules, it's about a person wanting to protect themselves. And a person wanting to make sure, you know that phrase that people used to say, I don't know anymore, but like saving themselves for marriage, right? That concept was so sacred across religious, you know, lines, across ethnic lines. Like you say that now, and you're like, everyone's like, save what for marriage? Like the only thing you should be saving is money, like everything else is good to go, you know? And so it's a very challenging time for you. I totally can relate to this and I can totally understand that. So then how do we make sure, now that we know that like marriage is when the Prophet encouraged, he even recognized, by the way, he recognized that some people can't control who they like or who they don't like. Like how many of you have ever had a crush before? Raise your hand. Thank you for telling the truth. All of you are lying. Everyone is lying. Like double, right? Okay, everyone's lying. Like you've all had a crush, okay? Some of you, actually your crush is probably here, okay? And that's why you're here. Okay, and so, he goes, it's so true. I heard one of you, just run, quickly. I'll hold it over. Okay? And the reason why, again, for anyone who's like not really familiar with, I guess, like Muslim like relationship culture is like, the reason why having a crush is just like, ooh, it's like we're all 21 years old and we're all like, ooh. It's because like there is this format of like familial sort of integration, not an arranged marriage. Not an arranged marriage. It's not like, hey, my name is Ustadh AbdelRahman, good to be married to you. You know, it's courtship, right? If you've ever seen like Downton Abbey, don't ask. If you've ever seen Downton Abbey or like historical like royal families, they would court one another. Like they wouldn't just be like, hey, I met you here. Like they wouldn't swipe right, and like that's how they would, you know. I don't even know what that means. I just used it, hoping it would work, and it worked. So all of you who reacted, like. So they wouldn't engage in these sort of like weird practices like courtship and like getting to know one another and having your family vet somebody. You know, this was the norm. Only in very recent times like was it individualized, was it turned into like an individual entity and enterprise, okay? So the Prophet ﷺ, like he totally recognized that crushes exist. He totally did. It was actually a really interesting story. Again, you may have heard it before, but again, different lens. So there was a young man who comes to the Prophet ﷺ, his wife had just divorced him, okay? And he wanted her back. So So he goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he's like, Ya Rasulullah, can you please, O Messenger of God, can you please try to like get her back with me? Like, I know that I wasn't a good guy before. I know that I was kind of lazy and I was negligent, but I promise I'll change. Right? How many of us have heard that before? I promise I'll change. Okay, don't raise your hand. All right. So he goes. The Prophet ﷺ goes, look, I can't like force her. A little Islamophobia alert. He says this. I can't force her to marry you. Okay, write that down. I can't force her to marry you, but he goes, I can go talk to her on your behalf, like any friend would, right? Like any friend would. So he goes. His name is Mughith. Her name is Barira. He goes to Barira, the girl, and he's like, listen, can I talk to you? She's like, yeah, sure, what's up? He's like, you know Mughith? She goes, yeah, I know that guy. And then he's like, look, he asked me to come and talk to you because he really misses you and he wants to like have a second chance. Will you let him have a second chance? And she's like, no, right? No, she didn't say no right away. She actually asked a really powerful question. She said, is this like a spiritual command, like religiously, do I have to do this? Or is this just like a suggestion? And again, the Prophet's like, I'm not going to force you. He goes, this is just a suggestion. And she goes, if that's the case, Ya Rasulullah, if you're not like telling me I have to do this, then no, I can't do it, right? But again, you see the respect for the Prophet's opinion? Like she's not like, no, I don't care where it's written, I don't care if it's in Bukhari. He's like, who's Bukhari? Like, Bukhari's gonna lie to me, right? I don't care if it's there, I don't care, I'm not gonna do it, right? That wasn't what she was like. She was like, is this a command, or is this just like a suggestion? And he goes, yeah, it's just a suggestion. Okay, which also teaches us, by the way, that not every command in Usul al-Fiqh, for those of you who know, not every recommendation by the Prophet is a command. Some can be suggestions. But that's not for us to figure out, right? We're like, pray 5 times a day, suggestion, right? So then, he goes, and Mughith is watching all this, by the way. Mughith's kind of like around the corner, like, okay? And he notices the Prophet's talking, and he kind of like, hides back. He's like, oh, he's like acting like he wasn't looking. And the Prophet goes back, and Mughith is like, on the edge of his seat, and he's like, what happened? And the Prophet just really, really like, full of compassion, full of mercy, just says, listen, like, I know you wanted this, but like, it's not gonna happen, I'm sorry. And Mughith just breaks down, like he just starts crying, and then he sees Barira walking away. And this is where it either gets, depending on how, romantic you are, it either gets kind of a little bit creepy or really, really sad, okay? So he goes after her and he like dives for her ankles, okay? And, okay, everyone just imagine, like, we have this weird, like, sort of, like, idea of saying, just imagine that it's really sweet and it's like he's trying to get her back, okay? So he dives for her ankles and he's basically crying, he's like, please take me back, like, give me one more chance, okay? And she just says no. And the Prophet ﷺ is watching this. Now, let's take a step back, let's zoom out a little bit, okay? Prophet ﷺ is seeing all of this, okay? Is this permissible in Islam? Between a person who's not a husband and wife, between two people who are not married? Can physical touch, can he like grab her ankles? Don't answer that, let me answer for you. No, okay? You cannot. Okay, I forgot, I'm talking college students. You cannot touch each other's ankles, okay? So, just the ankles. And anything else. Okay, so, until you get married. So, he's grabbing her ankles. This is something that is clearly forbidden in the faith, okay? Now, like, when something like this happened, the way that a lot of us imagined prophetic Medina was what? Like, we imagine the Prophet ﷺ, but then we imagine, like, 50 lashes for the ankle toucher, that's what we imagine. And this dude comes out with a whip, and they're like, we imagine the legal system, yes or no? The stories we've heard, the way it's been framed, we've imagined the Prophet ﷺ like, cut off his hands, like, but look at what the Prophet ﷺ says. He sees this, and he says, he's talking to Abdullah bin Mas'ud, okay, one of his friends who's next to him. He says to him, Ya Abdullah, and he's like, yeah, Ya Rasulullah? And he said, isn't it so interesting? And he said, what? And he goes, the amount that Mughith loves Barira hates Mughith. He just goes, it's interesting. And what he was saying was, Mughith can't control his heart. Like, Mughith loves this woman. And Barira wants nothing more than to be what? Away from him. She's like, get away from me, right? Ew, okay? But Mughith, and like any logical person, like the whole phrase, like, I know when I'm not wanted. Any logical person, if they're not wanted somewhere, if you remove emotion from the equation, what do? Right? They just move on, okay? So you go somewhere, you're not welcome. You go somewhere, you don't have proper access. Whatever it is, a restaurant's closed. Logically, you process, you're like, we just have to move on, right? There's no chance of me making this work. But the heart is very powerful, and that's the issue. The issue is that no matter what the mind wants to do, if the heart has its mind set up on something, you can't fight it. You can't fight it. I mean, let's remove from relationships for a second and just go to like dieting. Anyone ever tried to diet before? Why did everyone look at one person, right? If you've ever tried to diet before, you know exactly what this feels like, right? Do I want pizza right now? Yes or no? Yes. No. I'm a human being. Of course I want pizza right now, okay? If you don't like pizza, shame on you, okay? So there's pizza right here. I want it. But I'm also trying to diet because do I also want to live? Yes, inshallah, okay? So I'm trying to get rid of this cholesterol and high blood pressure. So my body, okay, not like, my body wants the pizza, okay? My mind is processing, I was quoting a song that I heard on Spotify, okay. My mind is processing that, you know what, this pizza's bad for you. Like, all it is, I'm not trying to make anyone feel bad. You're beautiful people, mashallah, okay? It's oily, buttery bread with like sugary sauce and like fat cheese on it, right? It sounds delicious when I describe it like that. Just put it in the blender and drink it, okay? So, my mind is like, you know what, like, this isn't good for you. But my body, like my appetite is like, but it tastes so good, right? If it was bad for you, why would it taste so good? Answer me that, mind, right? Now, whichever side my heart is on, that's the one that's gonna win. Whichever side my heart is on, that's the one that's gonna win, right? In Ramadan, you know the second plate challenge? So you're fasting all day, you have one plate, you're like, oh, that was so good, like, I'm ready to like go to Tarawih, hopefully get some prayer on. And then everyone's like, hey, you just want seconds? And then it's like Inception, time just slows down. And you're just like, seconds, huh? Like, and your body's like, no. If you have seconds, like, you're not gonna be able to fit into the thobe that you're wearing, okay? And a thobe should never not fit, okay? Like, it's like maternity wear for men, okay? So it's like, it should always fit. And your body is like, yeah, eat more. Your mind is like, no, don't do it. Whatever side your heart is on, that's the one that's gonna win. Now, I don't mean to make the analogy between human beings and food. Okay? That's a little bit too weird, okay? But it's the same concept with desire. If you want something, even if you understand in every way, shape, or form that this is not good for you, but your heart, and you don't control your heart, that's a scary thing, but your heart wants it, good luck, dude. You're in for a roller coaster. So if you don't control your heart, like Mughith and Barira showed us, and your heart basically can just pull you along like a super strong like dog that you're walking on a leash and like you have no control over where you're going, then how do you control it? Like then how do you make the right decision? Is it just up to chance? Is it just luck? Like is it just like my heart? The answer is this. The answer is the years that you've been spending up until this point and the years that you are going to spend right now are a preparation for you to make the right spiritual decisions. One of those decisions is who you choose to be in a relationship with. Who has the honor, and I'm not saying this sarcastically, who has the honor of being a person that you're going to give your love to, right? Because lust, sex, all these things, like, it just is what it is, right? But giving your love to somebody, lust and sex and gifts and all that stuff, they're just manifestation. It's just the language of love. So when you give that to somebody, you're actually giving them a piece of your spiritual self. Now, who's going to have that honor? And when you frame it like that, all of a sudden now, the strength and the health of your heart, it matters a lot. Okay? So in this entire process of marriage and relationships, the one advice I'll give to everybody, and I'm going to conclude with a couple like concluding points and we'll open to Q&A, is keep vigilant over the health of your heart. Keep vigilant over diseases like jealousy, like envy, because these are all indications of something. And you guys, by the way, man, the interesting thing about your generation, I know I sound so old when I say that, but we also were impacted by this as well, but like, I see it now as a 28-year-old, and I see it coming full force. You know, like, when you're watching a YouTube video of like, someone getting hit in the face with a ball, like, and you see it happening, and you just watch it over and over again because it's so enjoyable? No. But you know when you see a collision about to occur, and you're in a third person perspective? So back when I was in college, like, I didn't quite process this, even though I literally had, you know, imam someone living something is that you can't see everything when you are you, right? So you need someone to help you see behind you, and you need someone to catch your blind spot. I'm here to catch your blind spot, okay? The reality is that in your era, the music you listen to, the movies you watch, the things you read, the social media you're a part of, all of those things, they leave like residue on your heart, okay? And the biggest lie that we've ever been sold is that we can do things and it doesn't stick with us. That's the biggest, like, every human being on earth who believes that I can just do something and me doing that thing, there's no part of that that kind of lingers with me, that person's gonna be in for a big surprise. Because everything we do, is there anything in life that you take part of and it doesn't form a part of who you are? I mean, if we go back to the food example, like whatever you eat, like it's gonna be there with you, right? Even things that don't have calories, like water, it hydrates you. Everything that you interact with in your life becomes a piece of you. So when we talk about like pornography, right? When we talk about like Snapchat, like following people on Snapchat, and we think like, oh, it's just Snapchat, or oh, it's this, or oh, I'll stop when I get married, right? That is like the biggest lie that a person can tell themselves. And it boggles my mind. It used to boggle my mind, now I understand a little bit better. When I ask people who are like 28, 30, 35, 40, like, why haven't you been able to like have a meaningful relationship and get married? And they say, I just haven't found someone that's attractive enough to me. And to me, that's an indication that this person literally has been window shopping for like 20 years. And the issue with window shopping is, again, whatever you look at, whatever you see. Window shopping, not like sincerely, but like, I use that phrase meaning like, we don't check what we're watching, right? We don't check. There used to be a day and age where like, if a haram scene came up in a movie, you turn it off, right? I remember when I was in college, we were watching TV and like this commercial came on, this awkward like, yeah, just don't worry. It was awkward, okay? So, but the thing is, like, it was at my apartment, so like none of our parents were there. It was just all a bunch of roommates, and like, you know, we're not like the most religious people, but we're like, yeah, we're Muslim and whatever. So I was just raised in my home like that. Whenever a commercial or something came on that was like inappropriate, it had like sexual under or overtones, even now, you would just turn it off, right? Or you would turn the channel to something else. So instinctively, just without even thinking, I just like reached for the remote and I turned it off. And one of my friends was like, why'd you do that? And I was like, did you just admit that you're a pervert in front of everybody? Like, I was like, let's take 2 steps back and just recount what happened. Let's watch that on replay, right? Like, why are you so focused on watching that commercial, right? And the reason why I bring that up is because the reason why my mother, may Allah bless our mothers, the reason why my mother was so intent on that is because, not just because it was haram and haram this, haram that, it's because she knew that like, AbdelRahman, if you watch this stuff, it's going to deeply embed itself into your soul and your heart. And you will not be able to appreciate. When you see things that are fake, when you see things that are airbrushed, I'm not, forget like porn, forget sex, I'm just talking about like magazines. Like where they bend women's waists in to like impossible lengths. And every girl who flips that page is like, I'm fat. No, seriously. And you know what? It's not only women now. Now it's men too. Like men are like looking at different like, you know, airbrushed abs and they're like, I'll never have a six-pack, right? And like, and you know what? I'm sort of like, I'm trying to make it lighthearted, but when we go home, we're walking home, we have a moment by ourselves, like think about how dangerous that is. And so our entire reality, our entire shape of reality is shifting based on the things that we are consuming, okay? If you eat junk food for long enough, your body's gonna get sick, okay? And if you consume junk material that might not be food for long enough, your heart is bound to get sick. Imam Ghazali said something profound, I'll finish with this. Imam Ghazali said that there's 2 parts to every person's existence. He said that there's their body, okay? And then there's their soul. He said the body was created from dirt. Allah says, Halaqa min turab, right? He created it from dirt. So he says your body needs nourishment from things that also came from the dirt, right? So like we eat vegetables, we eat fruit. Some of us don't eat vegetables. Okay, we eat things that eat vegetables. Okay, so right, sorry vegetarians. Okay, so we eat all this stuff. If you trace it back, everything that we consume physically, if you trace it back, it somewhat came from this earth, somehow, okay? He says your soul, on the other hand, is not from this earth. Your soul is from Allah. And so nothing that you give your soul from this earth will ever satiate it. Can you imagine eating something and still being hungry? It's like going to Panera Bread, you walk in hungry, you walk out hungry, right? So like, but could you imagine? Could you imagine? Sorry, this fat guy talking right here, okay? Just super fat guy, okay? When you consume something from this earth for the purpose of satisfying your soul will never be happy. You know, like, true story, I'm just gonna be real with you, right? Because like, I don't think there's a need for like pretense, okay? I bought this watch today, okay? It's the Apple Watch, the Series 2, and I was like super excited, I was waiting for it, it's sold out everywhere. Alhamdulillah, Allah loves me, so I was able to get it, okay? So I got it, and you know what's hilarious? Like, you know what's hilarious? I've been looking at it, I watched the keynote when I got back from Hajj, not at Hajj, don't judge me, okay? When I got back, I watched it, and I was like, man, this looks cool, like, I started running recently, this is gonna help me, yada, yada, yada. Mary, what did I tell you on the way here? I'm like looking at it, Mary's shaking her head, she's like, every damn time this fool, right? On the way here, I'm like, I'm gonna return this. And she's like, why? And I was like, I just don't like it, right? And the funny thing is that this is the exact example of us. That we think that getting, how many of us thought that like, okay, I'm gonna buy this, that's the last thing. Anyone ever heard that thought? Like, this is it. And then they're like, you buy the iPhone 7, and like 2 months later you see like iPhone 8 sneak pictures. You're like, what the? Right? You're like bragging about the iPhone 7 for so long, and now like releasing the 8, you're like, this phone sucks, right? I remember when I got my first car, when I graduated college, and I was leaving the dealership. My first car, Toyota Camry, I was trying to roll with the uncles, literally, okay? Toyota Camry, I was so happy. Like, I was like, you know, like a college kid, like I have my own car, like it has a CD player, 6 CDs, wow, like what am I gonna listen to? Who am I gonna choose? Who's gonna make it? Like, who's not gonna make it? You know? And I was leaving the car dealership parking lot, and across the street, because it was a Toyota, like Toyota and Lexus, they're like sister companies, so a lot of times they have the sister dealership across the street. And as I'm leaving, I see a Lexus roll out of the parking lot. My car sucks, right? Because I saw the Lexus, right? And this is actually how Allah created us. You know, insan, the word for human beings, insan, shares the same root word in Arabic as nisyan, which means forget. And so human beings are like creatively disposed to forgetting their blessings. And it becomes incredibly difficult to remember your blessings when you consume things that just aren't good for you. Because you might be married, or you might have the prospect of having a relationship with like a beautiful, wholesome, handsome, incredible, funny, awesome person, but because you spent your entire young life chasing things that weren't good for you, when the time is right for you to really have the honor of sharing that matrimony with somebody or that relationship with somebody, when the time is right, you will want to, your mind will logically say, now is the time. Your body will say yes, and your heart will just say, I'm not feeling it. Even though all the reasons make sense. Even though everything lines up. Compatibility, check, right? Everything I thought I liked. But the real thing is that, the real reality is that the heart wanted something else. And so, be very careful, be very vigilant. I don't want to see everyone wearing a bubble tomorrow, okay? Like, stay away, evil people. No, like closing your Snapchat account en masse. I have Snapchat, okay? Like, but it's about showing self-discipline and restraint when you're tempted by things that you know are not going to be good for you. And it's about why? Because when the time does come, for a lot of you, the reason why I'm focusing on this stuff, all of you are like, why is he talking about marriage? The reason why I'm focusing on this stuff is because a lot of you, you're not going to leave tonight like to your wedding tomorrow, right? But this talk is incredibly important for you because you know the guy that I was counseling at Hajj who cheated on his wife? I asked him a couple questions, okay? He cheated 5 times, by the way. 5 separate times. Yeah. I'm not trying to scare you, okay? MashaAllah. These guys, good guys, okay? Good guys. No cheats, okay? No cheats. But I'll tell you something. Like if we're gonna be real, I'm not trying to laugh at someone else's pain because I talked to his wife and she was like, they both said the same thing, which is incredibly ironic to me. They both said, I never thought this would be me. Like, the wife was like, I never thought I'd be the person who got cheated on. And the husband is crying. And I'm asking him, I'm like, do you not want to be in a relationship with her anymore? Like, that's kind of how we process cheating, right? Like, you clearly weren't happy, so you went to somebody else, right? And he's like, no, I'm very happy with her. I love her. Like, the service he did for his wife at Hajj, the way that he was treating her, like, incredible. But 5 times. And so I asked him, I was like, how did this happen? You know, and it's not the first time as a counselor that I've seen this, but I know this person. Like, you know, I actually know him. I said, how did this happen? And he just said, when she approached me, like, I wasn't thinking, like, it just, something else took over, right? Like, my heart basically just fell for her. And it had nothing to do with logic or reason. And the reality is that this person did not protect themselves, did not shield themselves, didn't train themselves to handle when they engaged desire or temptation. And so the phase of life that you're in right now is the phase where you are doing that emotional, spiritual, romantic weightlifting. You know, you're doing everything right so that when the time comes, you're going to have the best relationship possible. Because if you don't, I'm not scaring everyone with the whole cheating thing, if you don't, that's typically how these problems occur, right? So right now, your number one goal is how can I be the most emotionally healthy, physically healthy, of course, right? Freshman 15, okay? Emotionally healthy, spiritually healthy, okay? And that's not to say like, oh, you know, like you have to do this right now. Spiritually healthy, spirituality is like your relationship with God, okay? And all of us in this room, it doesn't matter how we look, it doesn't matter what we're wearing, what we're not wearing, all of us are on that path, and some of us are better than others, where others are not better than us, okay? So everyone's there on their own. But your goal, it doesn't matter what you're wearing, what you're not wearing, your goal as that person is to get further along that path. Not to stand still, not to go backwards. So emotional well-being, physical, spiritual, okay, mental, these are all the things that you want to focus on, inshallah. And I know that it seems like, okay, this is kind of dragging, this time is sort of going on, like this is my years right now, but trust me, when that time comes, you will be very, very, very happy that you focused on yourself. Don't become a person that only is happy when you have someone else in your life. That's not healthy at all, right? You know the Prophet ﷺ, I'll finish with this, I know I've said that 4 times, I'll finish with this. The Prophet ﷺ, in his seerah, he was born to a mother whose husband passed away, okay? And then his mother passed away when he was 6 years old. He went to go live with his grandfather passed away a couple of years after, and then he lived with his uncle then passed, his uncle passed away, his wife passed away. So within the first, 2 to 3 decades of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, he lost more immediate family than some of us even have up until this point, okay? And then he loses, like his children pass away, like all these people in his life, they just pass away, right? It's ajib, it's very strange. And some of the scholars of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the historians and the spiritual commentators, they look at it and they mark a footnote there. So when you see, like, as the reader, you're reading, you're like, wow, so many people are dying in his life. When you get to that point where you have that thought, there's like a little mark. You're like, huh, interesting. And you see what the scholar wrote. Again, this isn't divine, but this is just a reflection, so think about this. The reflection says, and most scholars will say, that the reason why the Prophet ﷺ had to go through the test of losing his loved ones was because God wanted to make sure that he was healthy and independent on his own. And that he didn't rely on his strength and his emotion from other people, but only from who? From Allah. And so, I'm not saying that people have to die in your life for you to achieve this state, but we should have that same intention. Like, can I be healthy and happy without a man or a woman in my life? When people come to me and they've just broken up, like, what do they call when they want to get with someone right away? Rebound, right? Like, this person's Charles Barkley. Okay, so like, they want to rebound, right? And I tell them, and they don't realize it. All of us don't realize it. Like, whenever we're in a relationship and we want to get with someone right away, we're always like, I'm ready. Oh, it was kind of tailing off towards the end anyway, so that was my grace period. I'm ready now, okay? But I always tell that person, you have to wait for like 6 months before you can consider another engagement. 6 months. You just have to be happy being you. You have to wake up and be okay just being you, and not live life for the sake of another person, right? That's a sign of a healthy heart. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us success in this. We ask God Almighty to protect us and facilitate happiness and healthiness for us, inshallah. I'll open it up to any questions that anyone has. Inshallah, I know it's already 8:40, and everyone, it's school night. What are you doing out? Great the kids, okay? So we'll open it up to Q&A, inshallah, and then we'll have like one announcement about, real quick. Actually, let me do this announcement now before we do Q&A, inshallah. So, as I said before I went for Hajj, that was good, thanks for asking. As I said before Hajj, I'm going to be here as a resource for y'all. Like, if anyone wants to set up a time to talk, if anyone wants to bounce some ideas off of me. If anyone's going through anything, then I'll be here, inshallah. It's going to start to be on a weekly basis, so we're going to look at either Wednesday or Thursday mornings. I'm just going to come through here with my work laptop and just kind of like get stuff done for my masjid, but I'll just kind of be in the area as well. So if you want to meet up, you can text me, you can snap me, and we'll meet up. The other thing, inshallah, is that we hope to have a weekly gathering, inshallah, that we'll be working on with the board to see how we can get that going, inshallah. But essentially the role that I'll be hoping to help out with is kind of like sort of a chaplaincy role. And my job in that role, inshallah, is just to be available for you. So I know that I gave everyone like an email address before. That email address, FML, was taken, okay? So when I tried to register it, it was taken, so everyone's like emailing and there's like bouncing back. So the best way to get a hold of me is, for now, if you just snap me, it's AR Murphy Snap. You're laughing, but dude, I get like 300 questions a day on that joint. So like, if you could just snap me, AR Murphy Snaps, and just start your snap with like, hey, I'm from UTD, right? And then it's private, it's anonymous, you know, I'm not gonna, no judgment, alhamdulillah, like, if you knew where I came from in my life, you wouldn't even be listening to me right now. So you know that I'm not gonna, there's no judgment here, alhamdulillah. You can snap me, or you can text me, or you can email me, inshallah. Any of those, but I'll be there for you. Okay, let's open up to some questions, inshallah. Oh yeah, so this question, by the way, this question form, if you wanna submit questions right now, that we'll answer right now as a group, it's anonymous. So if you text us, then we won't see your name, we won't see your name. There's no sort of way that we can identify who you are, okay? So go ahead and text, inshallah, and take these questions. How long do we have left? 2 minutes? Okay. Alright. Okay, this is a really good question. You guys ready? Yeah, I got you. So you just refresh or does it auto-populate? Okay. So the question is, how can I prove? The only thing I can see is that you're on an iPhone. Really narrowed you down. Okay, so how can I prove the existence of God to an atheist? This is a very good question. The answer is you can't. So belief, the definition of belief is having conviction in something that is not empirically provable. Okay? It's related to faith. Okay, so knowing something is something that is empirically provable. Belief, having a belief in something, is something you cannot empirically prove. And so people who deny the existence of God, that is also a belief, because just like you cannot prove the existence of God empirically beyond a shade of a doubt, you also cannot disprove it. Okay, so there's sort of like this interesting tango that everyone's doing. What I would say is this: is that people who, so there's two kinds of let's say, like atheist agnostics, okay? There are those who are extremely nice, and there are those who respect other beliefs. You know, they themselves don't ascribe, but they are very, very respectful, and they honor people's beliefs. You know, I have like an atheist friend, for example, like back in college, you know, he wouldn't like eat pork around me, right? Even though he loved pork. Like, if we were ever working the same shift, he would like just not eat pork, or he would eat it before he got to work. And again, I'm not gonna melt like, oh, that pork, you knew, no, like just die, right? Like, but his level of respect was so good. It was so nice. So that's number one. Like anyone who is not part of your faith but has like a level of respect for your faith, great, awesome, alhamdulillah, awesome people. The second kind is like primarily found on Reddit, and basically, or the internet, and basically it's atheism with a whipped cream topping of condescension and arrogance. And the issue is that oftentimes these are the people that people are trying to engage with, trying to talk with, trying to convince that God exists, all right? And the reason why is because they provoke. My recommendation to anybody is like, don't get involved in the game of trying to debate theology. Don't get involved in that game. Just try your best to represent the beauty of the theology that you ascribe to, and that becomes the strongest argument for its validity. You guys understand what I just said? Rhetorical arguments, okay? Let me break it down. Debating doesn't convince people. Did you guys watch the political debate? Okay, did anyone from Donald Trump's side like magically be like, you know, Hillary's right? Was anyone like, did anyone go over?
Some did actually, polling said so.
Okay, so some undecided, maybe some, right? But generally speaking, If there was a diehard, you didn't go with my point, okay? It's true, some did go, so actually immediately afterwards they basically discussed like who, but I think those people were actually leaning more towards, they were previous Republican Party voters, they were undecided, from what I saw. And no one really from Hillary's camp was convinced by Donald Trump. I mean, how could you be? So generally speaking, when someone is set in their beliefs, like rhetorical debate is not going to win. In fact, even facts don't win. If we're learning anything from this political election, this presidential election, is that facts don't matter. That's what we're learning, okay? What matters is experience. What matters is how you make people feel, you know? So remember that. Live your theology, live your beliefs. Don't try to convince someone, you know, that Islam says this or Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that. Just do it. Just do it and you become a living, walking proof of that theology, and you leave it up to everyone else to decide. The other thing that I think is huge, which is important, is like, this is really big in England. Like when I go tour England and give lectures and stuff there, like they're obsessed with debate culture. It's like insane. Like they'll like bump into you in the street. They're like, let's debate. And you're like, what? They're like, hot dogs versus hamburgers. They're like, hamburgers clearly. No way, I don't want to get involved, right? They're obsessed with debate culture. And one thing that I told them is that like, when you debate somebody, you're only emboldening them in their own stances. And again, it has no impact. Like, it has no impact. Both people walk away not gaining anything, okay? And your job, Allah says, is not to convert people. Like, Muslims actually believe that we don't convert people, by the way. I don't know if you guys know that. It's not our job. Allah says that our job is simply to deliver the message, and scholars have said this could be living the message. It doesn't mean rhetorically, it doesn't mean verbally. And Allah says on Him is the accountability. So we don't go to people. I had a friend in high school, Lisa, I remember she told me, she was like really, really super Christian. Not that all Christians are like this, but she herself was like really into it. She was like, I'm so sad. And I said, why? She's like, you're going to hell. And again, not all Christians are like that. This just happened to be her personality, and I was like, thanks. Like, I did like, can I still share your locker? Because she had an art locker. So I remember that. And I remember like at that moment feeling so horrible. And Muslims do the same thing, right? Muslims will say to like non-Muslims, like, oh, you're going to hell, or like, oh, like if someone they're going to like, that's not our call. God says that you just live your prophetic lifestyle, and Allah takes care of the accountability. Okay, so you can't. More question. Okay, how can I pray better or feel a need to pray? This is a really good question. This is like a long sort of discussion, but I can give you a couple points. Number one is that spiritually speaking, a person does something when they feel needy. Do you guys pray more when it's like exam season? Okay, why? Why? No, seriously, why? Because you're like, right? Like, I'm screwed. Like, Allah help me. I promise will change, right? And like, you pass your exam, you're like, woo, get lit tonight. You know, like, and it's like everything else, right? Everything. And that's exactly how it goes, right? You know, Allah mentions this example in the Quran. He says that a person will be drowning and they'll call to God, save me, and I'll believe in you. And Allah saves them and they forget. Right? Insan, nisyan. It's so us. Like God knows us, right? It's like He made us or something. Okay, so the need to pray starts with the recognition of your neediness. And we don't like hearing that, do we? Right? You're like, I'm not needy. Like, I just told you about an Apple Watch. I'm not needy. Right? Like, we don't like that phrase. Like, no one likes it. We're so afraid of recognizing our neediness that we go into debt, credit card debt, to buy clothes with someone's name on its label so we can give the impression that we're wealthy to people that don't matter. Like, that's how afraid we are of admitting that we're needy, right? And by needy, I don't mean poor. I don't mean impoverished. I don't mean financially in need. I mean just in need, right? And so the first thing that a person has to do, if you want your prayers to like just start clicking, is you have to think about how lucky you are in so many ways. Now there's a lot of ways, by the way. You know what we're experts at? We're experts at the other side, where we realize how unlucky we are, right? We're experts at that. And the internet has sort of like heightened that cynicism. But if we can become experts at identifying how blessed we are in every way, then all of a sudden prayer starts to make sense, right? When someone does something nice for you, you recognize it. Does it make sense to thank them? That's all prayer is. You know, prayer is just the language Allah likes to be thanked in. So if someone recognizes how much Allah has given them, then prayer is the natural response to that. Okay? The second thing is this. I just want to make sure I'm getting everything. Where is it? How can I pray? Okay. So the second thing is this, is that after recognizing that you need to pray, sometimes it's also difficult just to get yourself up to pray. So you could be like in bed being like, I need to pray, and then you just knock out, okay? So what I would say is this. If you pray 0 times a day as of right now, don't raise your hand if you do. You're like, ah, me. No, okay. If you pray 0 times a day as of right now, the fact that you recognize the need to pray is noble. Like the people who are in trouble are the ones that are like, I don't need to pray. It's not actually part of the religion. It's just a construct. You know, patriarchy, right? That's male patriarchy prayer. No. But if someone recognizes, patriarchy is a problem, by the way, I'm not making light of it. But if someone recognizes that I do need to pray, like I do, then that person is already on the right path. Now, if someone prays 0 times, what's better than 0, everybody? 1. Excellent. 1, okay? Very good. So if you pray 1 time a day today, and yesterday you prayed 0 times, which day was better? You guys are making me so proud. I just love you so much, okay? So you pray 1 time a day. If you can't pray 5 times a day, that doesn't mean you pray 0 times a day. So you build up. You build up. And you know what? There's proof for this. If you tell your imam and he's like, bid'ah, right? There's proof for this. The proof is this. There's 2 proofs actually. Number 1 is that the Prophet ﷺ, before 5 prayers were ordained, how many times did the Muslims pray? No, actually they prayed twice a day. So before the Prophet, yeah, you're like, dang, why wasn't a Muslim back then? Because they killed Muslims back then in the street. Okay, so they would pull them apart with 2 horses. So I'll take 5 prayers now and pizza at MSA meetings. So it was funny. So they prayed twice a day. There was 1 prayer at Fajr and 1 at Asr. Right? Everyone's like, yeah, I follow that sunnah. Right? Then, okay, so you have this concept of gradualism. It's already introduced. It's already in the religion, okay? The second proof is that, like you guys mentioned, when the Prophet ﷺ met Allah and Allah gave him prayer. By the way, do you know why Allah gave him prayer? Because that was the saddest year of the Prophet's life. That was the year where his grandfather or his uncle died, his wife died, and he was rejected from Mecca. God's response to the Prophet's sadness was, you need prayer. So if you're ever thinking like, what is prayer good for? Realize that when you're in need, that is the response. But the initial giving of prayer was like 5,000, 50,000, some say 50,000, 5,000, 500, 50, and then eventually got to 5. What does that show us? It shows us that gradualism is a part of our faith. Now, that doesn't mean that 5 daily prayers is not applicable to everybody. It is. And if a person's not doing that, they gotta get there. But my thing is this, we fall into the trap of saying either 5 or 0. And that's not helping anybody, okay? So if you're only praying 0 times, pray once. If you're praying once a day, add another one. If you're praying another time a day, go for 4, right? And if you pray 4 times a day, try your best to get that 5th one in. If you pray 5 prayers a day, I'll tell you this. Doesn't matter how you look, doesn't matter what you think about yourself religiously. If you can get your 5 prayers in on time, you are what is called, my teacher told me this, you are called a wali, you are a saint of Allah. You are a saint. You're a friend of Allah. Because you know how hard it is? Isn't it hard to get 5 prayers in every day on time? It's challenging. It's not like a challenge like lift this boulder challenge. But it's challenging in the same way that like any difficult but manageable task is challenging. So if you can get that down, don't worry about all the other things that religious leaders are telling you to do. Just worry about your prayers. Anchor yourself. Anchor yourself with your prayers, okay? We'll do it. Okay. Next question. Okay, and then the other thing is this. I'll add one more thing to that. Another way to add to your prayer is by having a prayer spot and a prayer area. Don't just try to pray wherever you can, right? Get ready for prayer. Have something that you wear. It kind of gets you in the zone, okay? That's kind of going to improve your prayer as well. If you have a prayer rug, thumbs up, okay? Although you don't need one. You said we need to learn to be happy on our own without relationships. Very good. Excellent. Okay? What actions can we take in our lives to do that? We're napping. Good hobby. Okay, so there's a couple ways, but I'm going to give you just kind of one of the quicker ways, or one of the, I guess, easier ways to say quickly to you. And that is, you need to be able to find time and enjoy time alone. You know, you need to be able to, and when I say alone, I don't just mean socially alone. I don't just mean people. I mean like not listening to anything. Like turn off the radio, turn off Spotify, don't listen, turn off your TVs. Just get comfortable in silence for a little bit, right? Because again, we sort of live like where the heart works is in silence. That's where people start to, you know, like the most contemplative thoughts, like when do you have them? Shower, right? Very good. Why? Because, and then they started building radio showers or shower radios or whatever, right? Because there's nothing else, everybody. Everyone's like, how do you know? Yeah, we all do. Everybody, hold up. Why? Because the shower is it's like a meditative, pensive, contemplative thing. Like, you're being given this life by water that's refreshing you. There's no sort of conversation happening, hopefully, right? And you're just sort of like, there. The other time besides the shower is those last few moments before you fall asleep. You know, like when you're laying down and you finally put your phone down at 3 in the morning, when you finally put your phone down, the battery's dying, so you need to charge it. And those last 2 or 3 breaths before you fall asleep, those are where you have like those really real thoughts. And so if you can set up that time for you and not let it only happen coincidentally, but like tell yourself that every morning. Like for me, that's my coffee time. Like if you follow me on Instagram, you know, or Snapchat, you know that like coffee, I have a problem, okay? Make dua for me, all right? So I make my espresso at home and I just sit, and even like my cat, like I let my cat outside, I'm just like, go, this is me time. And I just sit at my desk and I don't even like go on Facebook. I know, I don't even go on Facebook yet. I just leave my monitors there and I just like sip my coffee, and it takes about 4 minutes to finish it, but I just sort of decompress, right? Sometimes I'll have a piece of paper and a pen in front of me, I'll just write down things that I forgot or things that are important to me. And they're not just tasks, like sometimes they're like relationship things, like make sure you check up on dad more often, right? Those are thoughts that like you have when you're not bombarded by yourself. And the thing is that your desires and your temptations and your nafs, your ego, will be like this loud, blaring radio constantly telling you, get this, get that, get this, get that. And the more you listen to it, the harder it becomes to quiet it so that your heart can speak. I know this all sounds very like fluffy, but this is real. This is the real stuff. Like the Prophet Muhammad said, "Istafti qalbak." He said, seek answers from your heart. You know, someone came to him and said, how do I know? How do I know if this is right or wrong? He said, he gave them, you know, Quran, Sunnah, this. They said, what about then? He said, "Istafti qalbak," ask your heart. You can't ask your heart if you're listening to something else, right? If you don't give it the space to make noise, you can't listen to it. Okay. All right. What do I do if others disapprove of a person that I want to be with? So I'm guessing this is talking like marriage, you know, marriage, like maritally or like relationship. I mean, it really depends. It really depends on why the disapproval is there. If it's for a nonsensical reason like race, then there's obviously steps that we take in the community, and I can act as an advocate or an arbitrator, etc. Because some of our parents grew up in very, very challenging ecosystems, you know, social ecosystems where they did rate people based off of the color of their skin. You know, that's why Fair and Lovely exists. You know, like, that's why whitening cream exists, because there was a social construct that taught people that incorrectly that lighter was better. And it's so interesting because white people want to tan, you know, and get darker, and, you know, people who are, you know, dark on the darker side, which is in the subcontinent, want to put cream on their skin and get lighter, and they're like fair and lovely and whatever. So, and there were people, by the way, who even made this comment about me, like in my marriage, like they told like my in-laws that like, you know, oh, you're so lucky that your son-in-law is like light skinned. And this is like in the 2000s. This is like 21st century. This isn't like 1700s. You know, they weren't slave owners basically. So they said these things, and I think that if that's the reason, then we need to be able to cross that bridge and get away from that crowd. Honestly, and that's what it is. It's just a bunch of crowd. But if it's like a legitimate reason, okay, if it's just a difference of opinion, well, let's say someone's personality clashes, or let's say that there's some sort of concern. There are some things that you will be absolutely right about. There are some analysis that your parents will get totally wrong, and you'll get it, okay? But there are some, and you knew this was coming, there are some that they will nail, and you will not see it at all until it's either too late or until you bit the bullet and you followed their discretion and you're thankful for it. So where this all comes to play, like how do I know? Like you kind of gave me a whole hodgepodge of answer. The way that you know is basically you consult. Number one, you consult Allah, you pray istikhara, you ask Allah to guide you and give you what's best, and then you make what's called istishara. You consult other people. So you ask your friends, you ask your family. Like if you meet someone that you think is compatible with you, like sometimes you will form your own compatibility to be compatible. You know, like, hey, what do you like? They're like, I like romantic comedies. You're like, me too, right? Like all of a sudden you go to Netflix and like start watching all these romantic comedies. So you start to like artificially create compatibility, right? Because you just want to be with that person so badly, right? Like you start liking the same music and the same things, okay? And some of that is somewhat natural. Like I hated cheese before I got married. My wife is a huge cheese fan. Now I eat cheese just by itself, okay? So I'm not like forcing this compatibility. It's real. I love cheese, okay? But so some of that's very natural. It's just a natural transaction of character. But if you find yourself being like unnaturally trying to force yourself, then you need to ask people, do you think that this is good, do you think it's compatible, et cetera, et cetera. Go from there, okay? All right, so we'll finish with this one, inshallah. We'll conclude with this one. It's 9 o'clock, and everyone's sort of like kind of getting up. I feel you. Okay, it's late. How do I know that he or she is the one? I mean, really, someone just stop. They're walking out. Hold on. I got 10. Okay. I mean, you just know? No. I'll say this. You don't. You don't know beforehand. You have a good guess. You know, in the same way that like when you take an exam, you study really hard, you read the question, and then you absolutely think you know it. But there's always that chance that maybe you read it wrong. Or there's always that chance that maybe the teacher like put a trick in there just to get you to stumble, right? They set up the question that way. So you can prepare as much as you can, but you may not know. And the reason why that's an important thing to remember is because it reinforces that thing that I was talking about, neediness. Like you realize that you need Allah to help you and facilitate this whole process. Because otherwise, if I told you exactly how you knew, you would just independently chase it. You would forget about praying. You'd forget about making dua for Allah to help you. You forget about all of that. But whenever remember this in life, whenever there's a percentage of uncertainty, that percentage is directly proportional to how much we start to pray. So you take a final exam, there's a whole lot of uncertainty there. And you're like praying more than any Muslims ever prayed in the history of Islam, right? But the more you're comfortable with yourself, like you're like, yeah, I nailed that job interview, right? Or like, I think I did really well on that exam, you find yourself not praying as much, okay? And so the reason why it's always important to remind yourself of the uncertainty of things is because it reinforces this relationship that you have with the one who can provide the solution for you. You never ever want to feel independent of Allah's aid. That's a very scary place to be. That's a very scary place to be. You never want to feel that way. Remind yourself how much you need Allah in your life. And you will always find yourself making the best decisions, inshallah. That being said, I just want to thank everybody. If I just have 1 minute of your time before everyone gets up, I want to thank you. I know that it is Wednesday, and sorry, I'm still adjusting from jet lag. It's Wednesday. You guys know that? It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday night. A lot of you probably have class tomorrow. A lot of you, maybe this is like your first Islamic lecture or whatever, and you came here for the pizza and you just felt too embarrassed to get up and leave. I don't blame you. I'm boring. But I want to let you know that I appreciate you. And I think that you coming out says a lot to you about the state of your heart. And then inshallah, you can build off of this. And if I can in any way, shape, or form be a part of that, I'm at your service, inshallah. I'm your servant, inshallah, okay? We ask Allah to accept. We ask Allah to give us healthy lifestyles and give us healthy futures, inshallah ta'ala, spiritually, emotionally, and mentally. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum.